The Perfectory Podcast, Mastering the Mind and Market. Hosted by Manny Charan, we explore what it takes to succeed, both in business and within yourself. From strategy and business growth to mindset and resilience, we provide the tools to lead with clarity, confidence, and wisdom. Welcome to the podcast today. We have a special guest, a good friend of mine, and really a badass in all that he does. Gerhard de Beer, welcome to the show.
Manny, thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, and the way I like to start off most of these shows, Gerhard, is really to get a sense of your background, kind of where you came from. So spend a minute or two talking about your history. What brought you to where you are now?
Oh, shoot, man. In order to do that, I got to rewind all the way a little bit back to high school. So I'm born and raised South African, right? And I was a rugby guy and a track and field guy, a discus thrower. I got some looks from U.S. recruits when I started doing well at international stage at the IAAF World Youth and Junior Championships. Now, what that means basically is imagine, the entire world participates a mini Olympic Games, but only for track and field and only at your specific age group, right? So a way to help discover young talent kind of idea. And so I did really well there, set a national record, set a world leading distance at 17 years old. At 18 years old, competed against 19 years old as well. At the same stage, won a bronze medal there. And I got a lot of people who wanted to recruit me to the U.S. for track and field. Then I found out about this guy named Margus Hunt. Now, my second cousin, she went to SMU as a thrower as well. She did pretty good, and they kind of tried to recruit me for football, and that's how I found out about Margus Hunt. And now Margus Hunt, he was an Estonian guy, also did really well at discus specifically, got recruited to SMU for it, and they didn't have a men's program, so all the financial aid and everything that he could get, tried to reinstate the program, didn't work, but the coach said, hey, come try football over here. Ended up being a second-round pick to the Cincinnati Bengals. So that was really cool. And I thought, man, what if I could do that, right? So I started poking around and said, cool, I'll come to your school, but I want to play football. And one by one, those schools started dropping away, right? And so SMU actually tried to recruit me at that time too, but so did the University of Arizona. And this coach at the time was the first one to recruit me, so I ended up going there. Long story short, never played a lick of football in my life. Walked into a D1 locker room, and I had to figure out how to put on my pads. Fast forward a little bit. Yeah. Fast forward a couple of years, got my football scholarship and started in year 3. And then a couple of years later, went to the NFL for a few years. Hurt my back, unfortunately, which prematurely ended my career. And as many other NFL guys, I didn't get to walk away on my terms, but on to bigger and better things from there. So that's kind of the long story short, I guess, how I got here from South Africa to the U.S.
Yeah, that's a great story. It really speaks to your perseverance and a lot about your creativity. And I think that having known you for a while, Gerhard, I know that you're tenacious. There's no doubt. But you're more creative than maybe people realize, and your ability to put deals together. And we want to talk about two things today in particular. The first of which is DigiWrist, a company that you are running that has a pretty broad reach in the athletic community. So I want to talk about that. But we might also touch on a bit of your real estate. I know you do lots of things in real estate, and I want to understand sort of some of the things you see happening in that world. So let's start off with DigiWrist. Tell our audience what that's all about and kind of what happened that brought you to that point today where you're involved with that company.
Absolutely. So there was an organization called, and I got to rewind again to really preface this as to how I got involved in the first place, called Football Without Barriers, right? And Football Without Barriers is a nonprofit organization that brings NFL players. This was at the time that I was playing, and they take them over to several different places around the world to increase football awareness, right? Promote the game and that kind of thing. So they take you on a couple of touristy things you do for fun. They also take you on a couple of things that you do for, community service. I remember, man, this was rough, but we were there looking at a couple of victims of war, children, right? Anywhere from infants all the way to teenagers. and really, really rough picture to really show you some gratitude for your situation, right? If you ever want
Sure.
to, think that you don't have it good, go visit them, right? And understand
Yeah.
that, trust me, it can always be worse. But anyway, so the camp, the community service, and the trip, and I met this guy who then involved me in an organization called Armilla. Now, Armilla was, first off, the organization that I got into the communication tech space with. And, I was part of that organization for 4 years, and I actually departed from that organization. I had no intention of doing anything after I departed that organization, because what happened after that was I said, you know what, I'm just going to walk away, take all my shares, and, I just want to be, go do this mortgage and real estate thing, which I did, right? I started doing.
Right.
And so then somebody approached me and said, hey, what if we, build this communication technology? I said, man, I don't know if I want to do that. I've already done that once. I'm good. Right. And so they ended up convincing me. And I said, you know what? All right, cool. Let's do it. Right. So we ended up deciding to go ahead and build this business. And I'm not a founder. I'm just somebody that, they said, hey, we know you have history with this, and we think you can have valuable input. Right. So I'm not a founder. I'm none of that, but I am intimately involved in the organization now. And so, that being said, long story short, right, we developed a communication system that calls plays, right, using a military-grade communication protocol called LoRaWAN. Now, LoRaWAN specifically stands for LORA, Long Range Wide Area Network. And what that means basically is this communication protocol was established a while ago, but it's military-grade because of its low power use, its resistance to interference, as well as its long-range capabilities.
Okay.
Really powerful stuff, right? And so we decided to integrate LoRaWAN into our communication protocol to give it stability and power to virtually be used anywhere, right? And I mean literally anywhere, right? So where you don't have cell service or Wi-Fi or nothing, this thing works. It's pretty cool, right? So we developed a brand new application, developed a small little wrist device. Actually, this is it right here.
Nice.
And, so new app, new small wrist device and everything. Nothing like the previous company I was at. Completely separate IP, completely separate design, completely separate functionality, everything, right? And the reason for that is I don't want anything to do with that prior organization. Like I said, I walked away, I left it behind
Yeah.
me, with no intention. But anyway, so DigiWrist technology now is actually going to launch in January, right? And it's going to expand into several different industries across the baseball and softball realm, and several different organizations. So very, very excited.
So this is a technology where the coach and the coaching staff can send messages on the field to the all the players or the captain, or who are they sending it to?
Absolutely. So let's say you're a baseball coach on the side of the field. Now, I'm sure you've seen a lot of baseball folks, do this and whatever signal or, hand touches, whatever the case may be, right? And
Right.
so our communication technology pretty much makes away with that. And so in order to avoid signal stealing or any of that kind of thing, you just hit a button, play sends, gone. That's it.
What seems
So
remarkable to me when I think about this technology is that it just makes so much sense. It just
yeah, I
there's
mean,
it's incredible.
it was fun. It's really funny you say that, because there was a lot of resistance when this communication tech came in first, and people said, no, we don't want communication tech in this space. We don't want this. We don't want that. We want to keep it the same way that it was. But a lot of people don't understand that something that doesn't grow eventually dies, right? And culture is the same. Any living organism is the same. If you don't grow, you eventually die, right? And so if you think about it that sense, I think that people miss the point that, things can always be one step better, right? And especially in sports, with the amount of money that's involved with it now, how much people will do to gain a competitive edge over, even if it's just having one system over another, and what that could potentially do for you.
Yeah, I think what's remarkable is if you look at some of these high performance athletes, we'll just use Usain Bolt for an example.
Yeah.
Um, Physiologically speaking, we're the same material that we were 80 years ago when they started doing these things, right? Or,
Yeah.
100 years ago. But obviously he's much faster, and we're talking, a few seconds on these different sprints. And it isn't just because we now have hacked some of the human side, which is minimal. but a lot has to do with technology, the shoes, the track, the material, the launch, the clothes, like all these things add 0.01% increase in performance. I think your technology, the DigiWrist technology, falls in line with that. I mean, just another evolution of the game.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, right? I mean, we look at several different platforms that continue raising the standard, right, of what that standard is. And the thing about what a lot of folks I don't think understand is once that line in the sand moves, you can't move it back, right? So once, and that includes taking it a step too far, right, in many different ways. But, once that line is, you can't move that line backwards. So for example, right, let's just say, hey, once the electric vehicle came out, okay, that was a new line that was drawn. Now it's a race to the electrical vehicle. Well, lo and behold, when the hydrogen car is going to come out, and I'm sure that'll happen here soon as well, because oil is going to be a thing of the past as things kind of become renewable and whatever the case may be. But as soon as that starts coming along, that's going to be the same thing. And then it's the race to the hydrogen engine, right? And then people are going to work on hydrogen, gas stations, right? I want to fill up my car with hydrogen, or, Circle K is going to be the first hydrogen pump, owners around the country. Every Circle K has a hydrogen pump, and that makes them the sole preferred, convenience store that you come into, right? That kind of idea, right? So,
Right.
and that's just an arbitrary example, but always when that edge moves a little bit, we see that constantly happen in tablets and phones, right? I mean, when you think about Apple and iPhone, right? How much they've evolved from version 1 to 16. Now, how much their evolution has been between from, let's just say 12 to 16 that it is today, it looks minimal at face value, but the guts and its capabilities that it has inside is severely different, right?
Right.
I think that a lot of people don't know that because the only thing that they see is, well, I see the phone, right? Okay, but do you see the user experience that has changed, right? And that enhancement that takes place. And it makes it even harder for anybody to start up and have a competing product in their environment at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And I think the evolution of sports today, there's always challenges in retaining and growing your viewership. And, of course, with the advent of e-games and social media, I mean, there's a lot of places you can put your attention to. And I think with sports in particular, finding ways to make it more interesting, more competitive. I mean, everybody loves to watch a great game, right? Where both teams are really leaning in, and, that nail biter situation. I think there's nothing better than that, right? And I think your technology may not be on the front end. You're not the shiny outside of the car. You're providing the wheels or the brake pads, right? Which is fundamental to the working of the machine, but maybe not sticking way out.
Yeah, it's not
So
the sexy
let me
stuff,
let me
the
add,
decal or anything that you can slap on a hat, right? But to that point, it
exactly.
enhances the speed. It reinstills the integrity of the game because now you can't steal signals on the opposite side and know what's coming, right? So it makes defense a lot harder, again, increasing scoring. So it makes things really exciting for fans.
Is there a public side to your company, or is it still kind of in stealth mode?
So it's pretty much in stealth mode still because we haven't launched, but there's a website up that folks can go look at, right? And things like that. So, if they want to go look and
What's the
see
website?
yeah, it's digiristech.com. And if folks want to go have a look,
DigiWrist
see
Tech.
at that and, see what the tech looks like, see what the development looks like, and things like that, and what the next step is in communication and play calling, they're welcome to do so.
I love it. I love it. I think we talk a lot about trends, and I think that this is right in line with the mobility and connectedness kind of trends. Certainly, there's some element of maybe not of AI per se, and maybe there is. I don't know. I'll have to ask you that. But certainly, there's a huge element of the deployment of new technology, leveraging a military technology for a sports situation. I mean, just sounds brilliant. So, but I do want to ask you about if you see any other trends involved with DigiWrist that I may not have realized.
Yeah, some of them, obviously, I'm going to keep a little closer to the chest for the sake of, development and things like that. But
Sure.
let's talk about predictive play calling just as an example, right? Well, let's just say, and we talk about live data and the capabilities that data has. I mean, you think about a sport like baseball, right? everybody talks when you say about data on baseball, the first thing people say is Moneyball, right? Because all they cared about was, okay, how many times did this guy get to first base? Because that helps us win games, right? Okay, he hit a home run a lot. That's cool, right? But how many times did he strike out? Or how many times did he actually get to base, right? So they talk about Moneyball, okay? Now think about predictive play calling. Well, let's see. This pitcher throws on his first pitch, he throws a fastball 82% of the time. He throws a curveball 7% of the time, and the other 11 is mixed, right? Just as an example, right? But on his second pitch, his odds of throwing a curveball are significantly higher than throwing it against, this. Oh, and a left-handed batter, he does this instead of that, right?
Right.
Predictive play calling. Now imagine if you had that kind of data at your fingertips. How much better that could make you as a batter, right? How much better that can make you as a pitcher to understand your own trends. Because I think a lot of people don't know their own habits, right? Until somebody points it out to you. And so being that little bit better at whatever it is that you do, right? Getting that competitive edge and understanding and studying yourself, the ability to be unpredictable, right, is what offsets the issue with data, right? And as humans, and that's why sports is such a human-oriented game, because as humans, we can account for variables that robots per se can't. Because if you tell, let's just say, this was the robot that I created, right? The only thing I've taught it to do is to do this, open and close. Well, I wanted to tilt this way. I can't. It's not designed to do that, right? But as humans, I can say, all right, well, let me just turn my body, then I can go that way, right? So it makes us, and silly example, but it makes us more adapt to, variables, because in sports, that's true. And you can be so creative with, on the football side, with blitzes and defensive fronts, crisscrossing people, and well, they're showing this and they're doing that kind of idea, right? So you can be very creative as to what you show versus what you do and how that affects everything that you're doing. And I think that a lot of people miss the idea when it comes to sports and AI, what makes sports so significantly different than any other piece of business or technology out there is AI can only help you so far. As a human, you still need to go and do your job on the field.
Yeah, we talk about garbage in, garbage out. If you feed AI garbage, you're going to get garbage out. I think that the concept of data-driven sports leadership is certainly, it's not new. And baseball in particular was one of the first that really took a lot of credit for that. We actually spoke briefly a few podcasts ago, Adam Hartung and I, about how football is now getting to that point where they're looking at, okay, if you're on the, 8th yard line and it's 4th down, what are you going to do? And they break it down percentage wise. And so they're now doing that more data driven. We're also going to have a podcast, one of these innovator podcasts, in a couple of weeks with the group that runs the Science of Sports. I don't know if you know Ricardo Valerdi, but they have a really cool.
Actually, I took a class with him at the U of A. We actually had a predictive algorithm taking data and, trying to predict the attendance for particular games, taking variable factors into account like weather, previous attendance numbers, those kind of things. Yes, I know exactly who that is. That's going to be a good one.
Yeah, he's launched an organization and he's now, I think, more of a board role. I think they've got a whole leadership staff and employees, and they create curriculum and all that regarding the science of sports. Throwing a football, why does it matter if you do it this way or that way? And so it teaches kids, it gives kids a richer experience on the science side by understanding how it's applied to the sports side. And then also it's just a cool thing to think about how much science is really behind all these sports. So that'll be kind of a fun one for sure.
Absolutely. He's really intelligent in the space. He's been in it for a very long time. And I'm not sure if he's going to remember me because, he had a ton of kids roll through his class. But if so, please do tell him I say hi.
I definitely will. And De Beer, come on, dude. You're definitely memorable. You're 6'7", 6'8" giant. So I'm sure he'll remember.
The problem was it was an online class.
Oh, never mind then. All right. So I want to kind of
in person. We did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to shift gears slightly into another part of your domain. And that is with respect to the real estate world, mortgage world. I know you do a lot of things here in Arizona, and you're propping up business units all over the place. You're in eastern, southern Arizona. You're in Tucson, and So give us a background of what that looks like, and then I want to have some discussion around certain trends that you're seeing.
Absolutely. So it originally when I left, or not left at that time, I got released from Buffalo, and like any given person, I knew I was going to get another chance to play elsewhere, which is when I went to Green Bay and then to the Colts and whatnot. So I knew I was going to play some more. But the reality kind of came to be, hey, let me start planning for what I need to do next. Because when you want to enter an industry and you start from ground zero, a lot of people don't want to talk to you or hire you, mainly because you have no experience and they can't put their livelihood on you. So the problem that I ran into was facing, how to navigate and fix getting around, the inexperience piece. Now, at some time I could code in 7 different languages, talk about my accounting and business background and all these different things that I took. Cool, right? But theory is not practical reality, right? And so a lot of the times when you walk into a new industry, right? I remember talking to my father, he's a surgeon. And when I asked him, about his classes and everything. And he said, when I graduated, there's no way I could have done then what I'm doing now based on the experience that I have. And this is an orthopedic surgeon we're talking about, right? Who went through 15 years of school, right? It's a
Yeah.
massive amount of education. And still he admitted that he had a steep learning curve getting into the real world, right? So, but
Right.
anyway, so at that time I had to figure out, well, what's going to come next and what do I need to do with my life? So, I talked to my mentor, Glenn Parker. Now, he played in the league for 12 years, Buffalo, Kansas City, and New York Giants. And so he was actually on that 4-year Super Bowl run that the Bills went with Jim Kelly without winning a single one of them. But he told me, have you thought about mortgages? I said, well, I know what they are, right? Not particularly on a daily basis, no. So he introduced me to this gentleman, and I started talking, looking at the industry. I thought it was intriguing. And so that's kind of how my real estate background started. And then I dove into it as soon as, I got done with the NFL, tried the XFL for a minute after I hurt my back. In hindsight, should never have done that. It only made it significantly worse. Took me 2.5 years to recover from that. That
Wow.
was fun. Yeah. Luckily, I avoided surgery, but it was a lot of rehab work, constant, maintenance, and I still have to do that today.
I bet.
But anyway, so, I was a flower delivery driver for a little bit, believe it or not. So here I am, straight out of the NFL, 300-some pound, 6'7" dude. Hello, here are your flowers, right? I work for Ingles Flowers in town. Hilarious, right? And so, but
Yeah.
at that time, I was studying for my mortgage license, right? And so I started studying for it, trying to get it up and going. Eventually did. Right place, right time, everything rolled in, and I was able to join Guild Mortgage at the time. And so at the tail end of the refi boom, so I didn't get to reap a ton of the benefits, but still got to participate in some of it, which was nice. And then it started turning upside down, right? And so started looking at, all right, cool.
What year? What time frame was this? Give or
So
take.
this was, 2021 was still good, low rates and things like that. 2022 is when things started turning, right? And 2023 was really, really rough. 2024 was hard, right? So not as rough as 23 because there was a transitional period, but it's still really hard. Now we moved companies in 2024. I actually, and this is why I said, I decided to do real estate full time. I truly meant that, right? Because I did do it. Started doing mortgages at a different organization. My partner and I started a different branch, and
Okay.
we kicked that off. And so
Yeah.
it's called Patriot Pacific Mortgages, right? We operate very lean. We're not a Fortune 500 company, right? So we have very small margins. So our interest rates are phenomenally low. In fact, 1.5% better than my previous place I was at.
Wow. That's
To give an idea.
remarkable.
Yeah, it's massive, right? So, but anyway, so that's how I kind of got started in the industry. Now, knowing my background in mortgages, I got to understand what people are earning for rent and what people are paying on a mortgage. Now, granted, it's a lot harder to find deals now because the rates are not, 3% anymore.
Yeah.
So if you had some cash, then great. But if you don't, now's an issue, right? So because, in order to try to refi into a 7-8% bracket, that's expensive, right? And it makes it very,
Yeah.
very hard to have cash on those properties. So long story short, that's kind of where we ended up at. And so we, decided to build a duplex here, do a flip there. And that's kind of how my background started rolling. So right now, I have partnerships with multiple folks. Those partnerships have developing properties across many different places, specifically across Ohio. We've got a few properties there, Section 8 rentals and regular rentals as well, identifying these submarkets, and also in Eastern Arizona, like you mentioned, and then also I do very little business in Tucson despite living there actually.
Yeah, that's remarkable. That's, when I talked about your creativity, that's what I mean exactly, is that you are able to find an opportunity, and then you're very intentful. So you, just like you on the football field, you're just going to be driving, right? And so I love that about you, De Beer, is that you just have that tenacity. What are the things you're seeing? And you mentioned some things with interest rates. You mentioned you used your background and understanding of the mortgage framework on the back end to understand rents and all that. What other trends do you see at play? We'll say even global trends right now affecting the mortgage and real estate industry in the place where you play, in Ohio, in Arizona, and so forth.
I think when you talk about macroeconomics and you mention, global kind of shifts, you got to look at, what those macro markets are comprised of. Let me give you an example. So every market is a micro market of another up until you get to the global scale. So what I mean by that is to say, all right, well, Tucson is a micro market of Arizona because you have, Phoenix, you have Western Arizona, which is Yuma, you have Eastern Arizona, where you get Safford, Benson, Clifton, those kind of areas, western side, and then you get northern side where you get Flagstaff and the White Mountains and all those kind of places where a lot of people like to have a second home and a cabin. You got Phoenix, which is a metropolitan, right, massive city. So all of these make up the micro markets within the macro that is Arizona. But Arizona is a micro inside of the U.S. The U.S. is a micro inside of the global scale. However, the U.S. is a massive trendsetter. So if we rewind back and say in 2008, the housing crisis inside of the United States caused a global collapse, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the economy that took place here, right? And if you look at, the interest rates that the U.S. drove, right, by pressing rates down and, filling in the recession spot to avoid the complete recession, right? What that did was it kind of forced inflation, all those kind of things. Housing prices skyrocketed in a ton of different places. Now, what used to be a seller's market has now become a buyer's market, right? So I think if we just look at, U.S. kind of trends, and the problem is when you take one subset of a market, you can find the exact opposite argument over here. So a good example would be if Amazon slaps down a warehouse somewhere and they create 1,000 jobs, I mean, you got a bit of an issue regarding housing, right? So boom, now in a small town of say 100,000 people, that market is exploding, right? Now you need renters, you need investors, you need people who are going to push that paper, realtors, mortgage originators, you need service industry people that are restaurants, you need grocery stores, you need to up your supply and demand. I mean, the entire economy is impacted by something like that, right? So when you take those kind of environments into account, there's always opportunity in different spaces. Where is the next design coming from, right? And then where is that next housing increase going to come, that next 10, 20% of growth, right? Because industry is moving into this location. Well, this company is, they're bringing jobs here, or they're setting, building a plant there, or whatever the case may be. So taking those things into account, all these sub-markets, right, always have opportunity. You just need to identify them. Now that's hard. And that takes a lot of research, right? Because you can go into all these AI models and they'll say, hey, a lot of people, this looks like a good investing spot, because guess what? A lot of people are doing it. Problem is, by the time you jump in, you're paying 10% more for your housing than they did. So, a $200,000 home is now $220,000, right? And, it's more of a competitive space because there's more investors in there. So the trick is identifying where these places are, right, as they are about to happen, right? Because once you do, right, that's where opportunity strikes. And once you identify it, right, make your move, be intent with it, and then know when enough is enough. Because a lot of people start getting greedy and they start pulling at things that they shouldn't be pulling at, and it puts them in a really bad position and it turns them upside down.
Yeah, we see that a lot we see a number of things you mentioned there with respect to clients and prospective clients we work with. People that, they want the tools to understand how do you find that information before everybody else does. And it's never a one size fits all. We're not just handing them a hammer. There's a whole intricate toolbox involved in order to understand those market trends and what's happening. Like, for instance, the Intel plant being put up near Columbus in Ohio, they just bought 1,000 acres, and so it got delayed. So what is that going to do with the housing needs? Well, those are all intertwined. So that's one thing we see. The other thing we see, and you said it when you said intent. A lot of folks, they read the tea leaves, they read the writing on the wall, and then they don't do anything. They don't act. They sit on the sideline, and by the time they do act or want to act, it's already passed, right? The wave is passed. It's already crashed down on the beach, and they're done. So I think that having the confidence, and there's a hell of a lot of risk involved, no doubt, which takes a lot of self-confidence and a bit of a foundation to stand on. I mean, you're not going to invest your last $50,000 in a deal and not be able to eat if it doesn't make it. So there's a lot of things at play there. So I really appreciate your perspective.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think to that point, you see a lot of people read the tea leaves and see the writing on the wall, right? But they don't take action. But many, and I'm going to say this in the most respectful way possible, is that's the case for a lot of folks, right? Because a lot of folks, humans in general, like comfort, right? Which is why we have AC. Oh no, it can't be hot. I'm too hot. I don't want to get hot. The sun's out, man. Like in the winter, oh, I'm cold. I need to turn off the heat. So I'm just mellowly comfortable, right? People
Right.
love comfort, right? And when you push people outside of their little box and comfort zone, they really have a hard time, right? And I think a lot of it is understanding your comfort zone is something that is it's a limiting factor. And if you continuously
Big
stick
time.
to comfort, right, you're always going to have an issue, right? Now, there's also a lot of education that takes place with these kind of things, right? Because knock on wood, but I haven't been in a deal where I've lost money on real estate, right? But the amount of data that I put behind each one of my research opportunities to understand what my revenue could be, right? And then I always play devil's advocate. Okay, but what if the market turns in the next 6 months, right? What if, this happens, and what if that happens? And if it's still okay after that and I have a break-even point or make a little bit of money, okay, cool, we can do the deal.
Yeah.
And then if everything goes great, right? So Ray Dalio had this beautiful thing that he said, the secret is not to having explosive gains, is to having minimal losses. So for example, right, let's just say you have $100 in the stock market. If you lose 50%, how much money you got, right? $50. Okay. Now, the question is what percentage do you need to make in order to break even again? Right? I mean, and the answer is 100%.
100%,
right?
100%,
I need to make 100%, because if you say 50, well, 50% of 50 is 25. Well, if you just make 50% back, you're at 75. So now you need to make 100%, and now you're just at break even. So you lost half your money. Now you need to double it just to get to the same spot where you started before you can even increase. So mitigating all your losses, right? As long as you're at a break-even point or a little bit higher, okay, cool, do the deal, right? On a worst-case scenario, if there is an opportunity where you could fail, do not be afraid to walk away. There will always be more opportunity, right? There's too much real estate, and this is just one submarket, right? But there's too much real estate out there not to take advantage of this opportunity. There are ways that you can avoid risk, wholesaling, right? Now, people don't want to put in the work, right? I mean, I wake up at 4, I go to bed at 9, 10 o'clock every single day. My average sleeping hours, I just checked, I'm at less than 6 hours per night per week, right? That's my trends, because, I get 1 hour extra work done a day over a regular week, I've worked an extra whole normal work day, right? Compared to other folks.
Pretty massive.
And I think that
one thing I like to ask sure, absolutely. One thing I like to ask as we wind down the podcast here is, imagine there was a magic telephone that you could reach back to 17-year-old Gerhard de Beer in South Africa. And of course, obviously you weren't didn't have as much wisdom, you didn't have as much experience. But what is one message that you would deliver to that 17-year-old about to embark on this adventure?
buy Bitcoin in COVID. When it dipped to $3,000, buy as many as you can, because trust me, it'll be worth 30x by the time you hit 2024, right? I mean, but it's really hard to answer that question, Manny, because I think when you look back at things, all these experiences have taught me lessons, right? To put me in a position I am now. Now, if you think about the wisdom that you have received through your hardships and the trials that you've had in your life, how do you equate that information to instill that in somebody? Some things you cannot just be taught. You have to go through an experience to understand it, right? As
Absolutely.
much as a studious learner and person you can be. I think the person that, or the thing that I would tell myself as a 17-year-old is, first thing would be, don't try to please everybody around you, because they're not going to care to please you. And I think the second thing I would tell myself is, no matter what your circumstances are, never, ever relinquish one step on your faith. Never give leeway to your faith. There should never be anything that takes precedence over that. If I could get
That's
those two
very powerful.
messages to myself, that's the only thing I would care about, because all the lessons will shape and form me. But if I have my faith that's rooted in forgiveness and my foundation, right, towards towards something that I believe is strong, right, and my integrity and things like that, then I don't think there's anything I could not face adversity-wise, right? And if I stopped trying to please the different folks, I wouldn't have had so many disappointments in people, because you create these inner expectations of folks that they're not aware of, because, you've given them something or a piece of you that'll just never be returned, right? And that's okay, because they're their own human. They don't owe you anything, right? And I think a lot of people think once they give some of their time to someone that they're owed it back, right? And I think we get lost in that message. So really deep, thought process there. So I apologize if I went off the rails,
No, that's good.
but that's what I would tell myself.
This is why we're doing this Innovator Series podcast, because being an entrepreneur, business leader, owner is a lonely place, and we don't always have the ability to have the perfect mentor. So we take pieces from social media, pieces from your brother-in-law or your dad or whatever. You kind of piece it together as your form as mentorship. So this is all really quality wisdom that we'd like to share with our audience. So really appreciate your time, De Beer. Always looking forward to new things happening on our side. I know we've done some things together, and I'm definitely looking forward to working more with you in the future. So appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Manny, thank you so much for having me. This was a ton of fun.
All right. Take care. Cheers.